A 7-year-old child dials 911 after hearing his teenage sister scream. The autumn wind stirs, surprising everyone present upon the police's arrival and subsequent entry into his stepfather's chamber. The maple trees along Cedar Street disperse crimson and gold leaves over the meticulously maintained lawns of the area. Ethan Baker, a 7-year-old from Boston, sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, systematically organizing his collection of Hot Wheels cars by color. The late afternoon sun formed elongated shadows. The window cast patterns on the blue carpet selected by his mother when they relocated to the house 3 years prior from downstairs. He could discern the familiar noises of Richard preparing dinner. The clinking of pots and the rhythmic chopping vegetables and intermittent sighs of irritation seemed to accompany all of his stepfather's actions. Defining Ethan's experience, small fingertips lingered over a vibrant yellow Corvette as Lily's footsteps hastened by his door. She was likely en route to her room once more, where she currently devoted the majority of her time. Ethan recalled when Lily would engage in play with him afterward. The school assists him in constructing intricate racetracks throughout the living room or narrating stories using humorous voices for each character that existed before Richard's arrival and before Mom commenced extended shifts at the hospital prior to Lily's diminished frequency of smiles. Lily Richards' voice resonated from downstairs. Ethan heard his sister's door open and close, prompting him to come downstairs and arrange the table. Her footsteps became slower and more hesitant as he abandoned his vehicle and approached cautiously. Lily emerged at the top of the steps, gazing down the corridor. Her long brown hair obscured her face like a veil, and she donned the big gray sweatshirt she had scarcely removed since school commenced. Despite the warmth of the home, Richard's voice resonated above. "I do not have all day to wait for you to complete a basic assignment." Ethan observed his 12-year-old sister descending the stairs, one hand gliding along the banister. She physically diminished her stature. With shoulders slumped and head lowered, there is nothing reminiscent of the Lily who once performed cartwheels in the backyard and sang Taylor Swift songs at full volume while Ethan sat calmly. Richard stood at the stove, visible from the intermediate vantage point into the kitchen. A broad back was turned to Lily as she commenced removing dishes from the cabinet. At 39, Richard Cooper presented an imposing stature, tall and robust, with dark hair beginning to gray at the temples. In contrast to Ethan's subordinate, Mr. Cooper, a recognized middle school teacher, occasionally assisted in coaching Little League and was regarded highly by his peers at home. He exhibited a different demeanor. Richard's incisive remarks pierced through the atmosphere, questioning one's competence. As Lily navigated the kitchen, she awkwardly handled the cutlery, causing a fork to fall to the floor. "Pick it up, you clumsy child," she was admonished. Ethan observed his sister swiftly bend to get the fork, her hands quivering slightly as she deposited it in the sink. He then retrieved a clean one from the drawer. Richard pivoted from the stove, bridging the gap between them in 2 lengthy strides. Lily flinched, nearly dropping the handful of utensils she held. Richard asserted, his tone subdued and measured. "I was conversing with you." Lily gradually lifted her head, revealing her face, which appeared pale and taut to Ethan. She appeared as if she was struggling to breathe. "What is troubling you recently?" "Your mother informed me about your mathematics examination." "AD. Are you all right attempting to humiliate me in school?" Lily discreetly expressed, "I apologize, I will rectify this." "Apologies are insufficient. You are fortunate that your mother exerts considerable effort to support you. The least you could do is demonstrate some appreciation." Ethan's little fingers tightened their grip on the banister as he wished to express gratitude without behaving foolishly. He intended to admonish Richard for his unkindness towards Lily, although his voice faltered, recalling the events of the previous week when he attempted to defend her during dinner. Richard banished him to his room without allowing him to eat, stating that young lads ought to attend to their own affairs. The noise of a vehicle entering the driveway disrupted the tension. Lily began arranging the table, while Richard retreated to the kitchen, his demeanor immediately changing. Grace Baker entered through the side door, arms laden with grocery bags. The kitchen appeared typical of a family setting. Grace remarked that something smelled pleasant as she placed down the packages and observed exhausted following her shift at the hospital. She had a nurse's scrubs that were creased, and her blonde hair was hastily secured in a disheveled ponytail. She affectionately kissed Lily's cheek as she walked by, attempting something novel. Richard responded warmly and pleasantly. "Now, Lily. Why?" Why don't you assist your mother with the groceries instead of lingering? Ethan watched as his sister hurried to the grocery store. Her movements were swift and anxious. Although his mother appeared oblivious, Ethan, concealed on the steps, stayed unnoticed while Richard conversed with her regarding her day at work. His thoughts grappled with the perplexity of why no one else appeared to perceive what he perceived later that night after the dinner had been cleared after completing his homework. Ethan reclined in bed, attuned to the house as it transitioned into its nocturnal stillness. Through the wall, muffled sounds emanated from Lily's chamber. Not precisely weeping, but rather the kind of unsteady breathing that preceded tears. He yearned to approach her as she once did during his nightmares, yet something urged him to remain stationary. Instead, he grasped his toy dinosaur more tightly. He murmured a prayer as his grandma had instructed him. "Please keep Lily safe." Into Rex's weathered kindly request Richard to exhibit kindness and assist Mom in observing the external wind conditions. The wind had begun to send other leaves skittering across the dark street. A siren wailed briefly before fading away. Ethan was unaware of it. However, within a few days, he would be the one summoning that type of siren to Cedar Street. And nothing in their meticulously crafted family life would ever be identical when the morning sun permeates the dusty blinds of Lily stood before her unmade bed, with striped shadows spread across the room, her mirror grasping the sleeves of yet another big sweatshirt, ensuring her wrists were entirely concealed. At the age of 12, she had already begun to learn the art of "Lily, you will be late." Grace's voice resonated up the stairs, laced with the common morning anxiety of a working mother. "Richard is departing in 10 minutes." Following the mention of her, Lily's gut tightened at the mention of her stepfather's name. As she grasped her heavy rucksack, she descended the stairs to the kitchen, where Ethan was seated. With books, she had been unable to concentrate on the previous night. The small table's legs swayed as he consumed cereal, his Spider-Man backpack positioned next to him. "There you are," Grace said, hurrying by with Richard's travel mug of coffee. "I will provide both of you with a ride, as I have an early shift." "Lily dear, you seldom," Lily murmured, avoiding her mother's anxious gaze. That she was not hungry and had not touched her breakfast. She observed Ethan observing her. His youthful visage was earnest, and he appeared to be aware Richard made a comment from his seat at the counter recently, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a balanced diet. His tone conveyed an edge that only Lily and Ethan seemed to understand. "Especially after you stopped playing soccer, it's not a good idea to become lazy to assist in enhancing your grades." Grace paused in her morning haste. Frowning, Lily softly mentioned that she dropped soccer last week while studying. Grace argued that she no longer wished to play. "Despite her love for soccer, you have been playing since the age of 6. Children evolve gracefully, like Richard C. Although the time may be suboptimal given her recent academic achievement." He checked his watch and stated, I had a faculty meeting this morning." The journey to school was tense, characterized solely by the sound of the morning radio and Ethan's sporadic humming from the rear seat. And Lily squeezed herself against the passenger door. She attempted to minimize her presence as they arrived at the elementary school. Richard grasped her knee, recalling their previous conversation, and urged softly as Ethan collected his belongings. "No more embarrassing conduct, you are superior to it. Are you not?" Lily nodded silently. Relief surged through her as Ethan's door opened, but her younger brother hesitated before exiting. "Lily," he muttered, "will you attend my class's art show next week?" "I created something impressive." Before Lily could respond, Richard intervened on her behalf, emphasizing that her sister should focus on enhancing her academic performance. The expression of sadness on Ethan's face caused Lily's heart to throb. She waited until he had closed the door before whispering, "I'll attempt to ascertain what that was." Richard's tone became stern as they departed from the elementary school, disregarding Lily's remarks. While acknowledging Richard's grip grasped the driving wheel firmly, refrain from mumbling, "As it is disrespectful, akin to your behavior. Recent demeanor suggests that I take pleasure in receiving letters from your instructors, necessitating explanations to my co-workers regarding my stepdaughter's significant academic underperformance, prompting a visit to her middle school." However, instead of arriving at the institution, they are approaching it. Richard entered the teacher's parking lot and located a space in a secluded corner. He commanded, turning in his seat to speak with her. And Lily compelled herself to meet his gaze. Her glance attempted to suppress her quiver. "You are causing me to appear unfavorable." "Lily, your mother's concern is that this is your want." "No," she muttered. "Then improve your behavior." No more. Dee's attitude has ceased. No longer will there be sulking about the house. Disdain laced the victim's voice. "You are utterly pathetic, are you aware of that?" The young lady who struggles with fundamental academic tasks now ventures outside and recalls one. "Disclose our confidential chats to anyone, and the situation will deteriorate significantly. Understood?" Lily nodded. Appearing flustered with her seatbelt on and nearly tumbling out of the vehicle in her eagerness to go, she rushed across the parking lot, highly aware of Richard observing her. The other students passed by, laughing as professors exchanged morning pleasantries. No one appeared to notice the child in the oversized sweatshirt, clutching her books to her chest as if they were armor during her first period during English class. Lily attempted to concentrate on The Giver, her favorite book from the previous year. However, the words blurred before her vision as Mrs. Patter deliberated on the concepts of conformity and silence. When prompted, Lily's voice emerged as a mere whisper, eliciting snickers from several classmates. "Please articulate your thoughts," Mrs. Patterson respectfully requested. "We would be eager to hear your perspective." However, Lily's throat had completely constricted, and she shook her head, retreating into herself. Mrs. Patterson shifted her gaze with concern as Lily expressed her affection. This class enthusiastically raising her hand to share the novels she consumed at home. Her cherished literature now remained neglected on the shelves, supplanted by an expanding, not experiencing worry in her stomach at lunch. She sought a secluded nook of the library as she retrieved her math homework. The D she received on her last test seemed as though it was searing a hole in her knapsack. She has struggled with algebra, but recently the numbers have appeared insurmountable to her. The mind is perpetually preoccupied with anxiety regarding Richard's mood upon her return home. "Hey, Lily," a gentle voice inquired. Sophie, her best friend since 4th grade, interrupted her thoughts by saying, "We missed you at practice yesterday." "Lily." She focused intently on her textbook. "I resigned. I understand. But why did Coach Martinez state that you?" Sophie hesitated, inquiring whether everything was all right, as you appeared unsettled about maybe becoming captain next year. Lily's situation has changed recently. For a minute, she nearly succumbed. Sophie has supported her throughout all challenges, even her parents' divorce, her father relocating to California, and her mother beginning a relationship with Richard. However, Richard's words resonated in her mind. Things would improve significantly worse. She could not afford to risk him executing his threats on the consequences if she, Lily stated, "I'm fine." While attempting to maintain a smile that seemed strained, Sophie appeared unconvinced. Preoccupied with academic obligations, the bell rang before she could inquire further. Lily hastily collected her belongings, evading her friend's concerned glance as she traversed the hallway. She passed Richard's classroom and discerned his voice emanating from the ajar door, warm and inviting while he engaged his students in a discussion on American history. The disparity between his public persona and the individual he truly was became evident, constrained her within the vehicle, causing her to question her sanity. Despite the concealed bruises beneath her sweater was genuine, the tremor in her hands upon hearing his approach was authentic, as was the rising quiet within her where words formerly inhabited reality. That afternoon, instead of proceeding to soccer practice, Lily walked home alone. The autumn air was brisk, with leaves crunching beneath her feet as she took the longer route. Postponing the unavoidable return as she approached the house, she contemplated Ethan's art exhibition, recalling how his expression illuminated with joy every time she focused on him. She was once a commendable older sister, believing she could shield him from the creatures beneath the bed, and from bullies at the park. She could scarcely defend herself. The kitchen clock indicated 7:43 p.m. Ethan was meticulously pouring milk over his second bowl of Cheerios while his mother was working her night shift at the hospital. He and Lily were with Richard again. The home felt altered on these nights, somehow more constricted, as if the very air was holding its breath. Lily quietly suggested from across, "I can prepare you a real dinner." She was sitting at the table, meticulously touching her cereal and pushing it around the bowl, when Richard's movements disturbed her. He is already eating in the living room. Cease attempting to coddle him.
Pause. Then Lily. Please come here and assist me in grading these papers. Since you are quite capable.
Ethan,
Acquainted with poor academic performance.
observed his sister's knuckles turn pale as she gripped her spoon.
Continue, he urged softly. Lily rose from the table. Her chair quietly scraping against the floor.
Ethan observed that she continued to wear her sweater despite the heating being set to maximum as she ascended the stairs. Recalled a statement made by his teacher.
Miss Collins. At their safety assembly the previous week, heed your instincts if something appears amiss.
It is likely so. Numerous matters have been erroneous. Recently completed his breakfast while listening to the muted conversations from above. Richard's the tone became more acute.
Yet Ethan could not discern the words. Then a sound emerged that he acknowledged as Lily's effort to suppress tears.
Characterized by the stilted breathing she exhibited in her attempt to remain silent about it.
Which seemed foolish. Richard's voice abruptly resonated. Succeeded by a thump. Causing Ethan to freeze in place, his body tensed with each thud. Followed by a cry of pain that could only belong to Lily. Piercing his heart, he commenced running as he recalled more of Miss Collins's admonitions. If you suspect someone is in peril, contact authorities. As he approached the kitchen drawer with the emergency numbers.
The old cordless phone seemed burdensome in his hand. He could hear Richard shrieking now.
With terms like worthless and un. While his hands trembled. Ethan, overwhelmed with shame and nausea from the cacophony, retreated into the pantry and dialed 911. The phone rang once. Then again. 911. What's your emergency?
Ethan's voice emerged smaller than intended. I believe my sister is being harmed.
All right. Dear, you exhibit considerable bravery for making this contact.
Could you please provide your name and address?
My name is Ethan Baker. And we reside at 247 Cedar Street. A subsequent bang from the upper floor startled him.
Please expedite assistance. It concerns my stepfather. Richard is inflicting harm on Lily.
I am dispatching officers immediately.
Ethan? Can you remain on the line? I hear police sirens in the distance as the words burst from him as they drew nearer.
Red and blue lights began to flicker through the windows.
A secure location to await. Do not attempt to intervene.
Understood?
He nestled more into as heavy footsteps reverberated down the stairs.
Richard's voice resonated throughout the home, exclaiming, "What the hell?"
The front door swung open with a boom that compelled Ethan to protect his ears as numerous authoritative voices flooded the home. Urgent police.
Everyone is free.
What is occurring?
Richard's voice has altered, adopting the calm and rational tone he employed at school.
There must be some. A female officer's voice pierced through the commotion. Instructing to verify the mistake upstairs. Increased footsteps on the stairs followed by a gasp. We require medical assistance upstairs. Ethan stealthily exited. A tall officer spotted him in the pantry.
The phone still clasped to his chest, approaching gradually with hands elevated. I said,
"Greetings,
my friend. I am Officer Mike. Did you?"
Ethan nodded.
His gaze locked on the steps.
Is Lily all right?
Paramedics hurried through the front door with a stretcher, handcuffing Richard before the officer could respond in the living room.
His face contorted with wrath as he beheld Ethan.
You little. An officer covered Richard's lips with his palm and forcefully directed him toward the door, instructing, "Do not look at him." Officer Mike stated by putting himself between Ethan and Richard. You acted appropriately. The paramedics then descended the stairs as Lily lay on the stretcher.
Ethan glimpsed his sister's tear-streaked and scarred face.
Yet her eyes met his. A look of relief combined with fear and even pride went between them.
Lily muttered. They transported her past. Someone must notify Mom. We are currently reaching out to her. The female cop told her that her mother was already on the stretcher. The home appeared to exhale. Tension dissipating with Richard's departure. Officer Mike knelt alongside Ethan, who suddenly felt fatigued.
Would you care to explain what transpired this evening?
Ethan gazed at the phone in his hands, then at the vacant stairs where he had observed his sister diminish day after day. His voice intensified as he spoke. It commenced a considerable time ago.
He began. Richard, he had always been unkind to Lily. But this evening, as police cameras ascended the stairs and evidence technicians began their work,
He showed a different side. Ethan recounted his narrative,
detailing the transformations in his work. Sister. The apprehensive silences. The concealed wounds he has observed.
He recounted to them Richard embodied two distinct personas, the public facade he used to deceive others and the private voice he used to harm Lily with words.
To make matters worse,
he observed from the window that the ambulance's lights were still flashing, illuminating the scene,
assembling neighbors in waves of red and blue. He recognized individuals inside that throng. His mother was on the verge of realizing the extent to which their family life had been disrupted. And as he concluded his narrative, Ethan experienced an unusual strength. He had accomplished what was expected of adults.
He safeguarded an individual in need. As the debilitating anxiety that had constrained him for an extended period began to relinquish its grasp, autumn leaves scuttled across the front walkway where Richard had been escorted away in handcuffs as the night air surged through the open front door, dispelled the oppressive atmosphere that had enveloped their home. Change had arrived abruptly on Cedar Street like the storms that periodically ravaged their area.
This night would cause devastation while simultaneously purifying the atmosphere, thereby facilitating the emergence of new growth.
Detective Diana Chun had encountered numerous interrogation rooms during her 15 years with the Boston Police Department.
Yet this particular one evoked a distinct sensation. Perhaps it was the diminutive figure slouched in the big chair,
with feet scarcely grazing the earth, clutching a dinosaur plush toy that a patrol officer had recovered from his room. Ethan Baker's eyes were fatigued.
Yet he observed every element of the child-friendly environment, which is impressive.
Dinosaur Detective Chin inquired while handing a hot chocolate across the table. Does he?
His name is Rex. Ethan responded softly.
Lily gifted him to me for my birthday last year upon the mention of his sister's name. His small fingers clenched the plush animal tightly during the observation. Grace Baker walked the corridor, her nursing scrub still donned from her interrupted shift,
conversing urgently with Dr. Rachel Morris, the department's child psychologist, who initiated an investigation with Detective Ethan Chun.
Could you please explain why you phoned 911 regarding the boy's facial condition this evening, Miss Collins?
My teacher was scrunched in concentration as she spoke to us about last week. She stated that if we suspect someone is in peril, we should initiate an emergency call. Immediately. He gazed at the investigator and remarked, I have delayed too long.
Haven't I?
I ought to have. The straightforward acknowledgement struck Chun with the force of a physical blow. You did precisely the right thing.
Ethan?
None of this is your responsibility. Richard hurt Lily. He persisted, his voice growing stronger this evening. He frequently uttered unkind remarks to her,
causing her distress. Ceased participating in soccer and socializing with Sophie,
who consistently dons oversized sweaters.
Even in warm weather her lower lip quivered as I heard him strike her tonight. She was weeping yet attempting to conceal her distress. Maintain discretion. She consistently attempts to be silent. Chun acknowledged this while taking notes, maintaining her composure. She recounted the derogatory remarks made by Richard,
who referred to her as foolish and insignificant. He becomes rather irate over trivial matters, such as when Lily fails to put things properly,
especially when he is embarrassed at school in the absence of our mother. Ethan's expression soured at the prospect of receiving poor grades.
Although he behaves differently at school, leading others to form various opinions about him, he is amiable.
No one was aware of this when a gentle knock interrupted them. Dr. Morris entered. A soothing presence permeated the room. Ethan?
Your mother wishes to see you.
Would that be acceptable? The youngster nodded and slid off while maintaining a strong hold on Rex at the door.
He turned to Detective Chin and inquired,
Is Lily going to be all right?
Doctors are providing excellent treatment for her. Chen informed him that she is very proud of you. After Ethan departed,
Chun evaluated her. Notes are being added to the expanding file on Richard Cooper. As the preliminary medical report from the hospital has been reported, Lily's injuries include bruising at different stages of healing and a sprained wrist. Evidence of persistent physical abuse existed, although it was the psychological damage that concerned them the most regarding the systematic nature. The disintegration of a 12-year-old girl's spirit due to seclusion and verbal abuse intimidation in the conference room down the hall was causing Grace Baker's world to crumble for the second time. Dr. Morris sat with her at night, Elucidating the indications they had overlooked and the underlying pattern abuse that had transpired unnoticed, I worked numerous shifts while Grace often remarked that her voice sounded hollow. I believed I was providing for them.
And I felt he was assisting in their care while I worked. How did abusers frequently exhibit adeptness in manipulation?
As Dr. Morris elucidated, with care they induce isolation,
rendering their victims weak and embarrassed.
As Richard employed, he utilizes his role as an educator to lend legitimacy to his actions, framing Lily's difficulties as typical academic challenges. Issues instead of manifestations of abuse. Grace covered her face with her hands during those instances when he volunteered to assist with schoolwork or transport children to school.
He was generating opportunities, for which I expressed my gratitude. She abruptly glanced up. Realizing that he couldn't be there, Detective Chun is addressing the situation concerning children first thing in the morning. As Dr. Morris has told her, concentrate on your children. Lily will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow.
But she will require substantial assistance from you. Children will be in the hospital across town where Lily Baker lies in a pediatric bed. Ultimately, the patient was resting under mild sedation while the nurse kept the television on at a low volume. A late-night cookery program served as a soothing background ambience,
while a modest craft piece, a painted clay item, rested on the bedside table. The turtle was evidently crafted by a 7-year-old, as the nurse had previously delivered it,
accompanied by a note in unsteady handwriting from a child addressed to Lily. I created this at school for the art project.
I regret that you were unable to visit, but the turtle shell is yours. With affection,
Ethan. It was somewhat uneven,
with the paint somewhat smudged.
Yet it symbolized something profound, a mother's love for her kid, courage, and the initial step towards reconciliation for a family that had been quietly disintegrating. In the Detective Chun appended a final remark to her report regarding primary witness Ethan. A 7-year-old Baker exhibited exceptional awareness and bravery in identifying it,
and it is advisable to report the continuous abuse and to follow up with victim support agencies, both parties involved. Children. She stopped, then added that extra care should be accorded to preserving the robust sibling connection between Ethan and Lily Baker, as this relationship seems to be essential. The source of support for both children was concluding the night shift, however.
The case was merely commencing. Tomorrow would usher in new development. School investigations,
additional interviews, and the protracted healing process ensued. Yet, a fundamental transformation had occurred. The quiet was shattered, and in its stead,
truth was finally articulating itself. Morning sunlight illuminated Detective Chen's office as she laid out the newly collected materials. Personnel files from the 3 schools where Richard Cooper had previously taught each included a similar narrative: exemplary performance evaluations,
laudatory endorsements,
and abrupt mid-year relocations indicate a discernible pattern she communicated to her partner,
Detective Marcus Torres.
On the 2018 Lakewood Middle School incident in 2020 Pine Valley Academy 2022 Riverside Middle is currently present. As she indicated, their current status: document any transfers requested during the academic year. Ensuring minimal disruption documentation, Torres examined the timeline she had created, noting that each school featured at least one informal element. A complaint was lodged by a female student aged between 11 and 13.
But no action was taken since he had already left.
Chun initiated the formal investigation and carried out the regular procedures: execute the predator playbook maneuver prior to the escalation of the whispers.
As her computer is on a timer upon receiving a new email,
her expression hardened on the initial interview transcript from Riverside Middle School's former staff. A 14-year-old student named Emma Walsh describes experiencing verbal abuse and harassment from at the age of 12. Cooper scanned a document indicating that he would retain her after class and demean her by stating she was useless and stupid. Does this sound familiar?
Lily Baker Torres nodded. Did he become physical with her unlike the others?
The pattern of emotional abuse is consistent. He was escalating with each school. Boulder Lily was just the initial one he had continuous access to. Down the hall, Dr. Morris was conducting her 3rd session with Lily,
who sat curled in an overstuffed armchair, her speech scarcely audible. In a hushed tone, she recounted the months of torment, asserting that no one would believe her, as Lily fidgeted with a loose thread on her sleeve that would disappoint Mom, since she would believe I was fabricating lies that could lead to destruction.
Ethan believed you.
Dr. Morris.
Even without your prompting, Lily's expression softened as she informed him for the first time that morning he sensed something was off. He attempted to divert Richard's attention when he became irate or to accompany me following difficult days. She wiped her eyes, stating,
I was meant to safeguard him, after all. I am the elder sister. Yet he ultimately provided me with protection. And at Riverside Elementary, Miss Collins was seated in the principal's office. I recounted last week's safety assembly, unaware of the details. Ethan required that information promptly, she stated, her voice trembling as she spoke. We contacted the police this morning regarding the presentation we conducted for the principal. Martinez leaned closer, stating that you may have saved that girl's life,
Sarah. And now it is imperative to ensure that this situation does not recur. I require all educators to be trained in identifying indicators of abuse during the recruiting process. We implemented protocols for enhanced background checks at the station where Grace Baker sat as the district attorney examined the mounting evidence against her husband. Her hands trembled as she affixed her signature. The restraining order documentation indicates sufficient evidence to incarcerate him for an extended period,
as assured by the district attorney on the physical abuse. Lily.
The pattern of emotional abuse spans numerous schools. No jury will intervene. Grace asserted her desire to express solidarity with him to the school board, and the parents require clarification on how he evaded detection and utilized his position to conceal his actions within the hospital.
Ethan having finally been permitted to visit his sister, he ascended cautiously onto the side of the bed.
Observing the bruises on her with a somber gaze,
she inquired, Does it hurt? As he gently touched her hand. Not so, she replied. Lily responded with a slight smile. I appreciate your turtle. Ethan expressed his enthusiasm,
stating he chose blue because it is your favorite color. Despite the fact that real turtles are not blue, it is ideal. Lily expressed her gratitude to Ethan for contacting them to ascertain the situation. Miss Collins thinks that there are instances when children possess a clearer perception than adults,
as exemplified by Ethan. She responded earnestly, stating that we ought to trust our emotions. You are rather astute for a 7-year-old. You realize that because I have an intelligent older sister.
The simple interaction elicited tears from Grace's eyes as she observed from the doorway.
Dr. Morris stood beside her,
scrutinizing the interplay they would require each other during the healing process. The psychologist saw that Bond's acts are particularly noteworthy.
More than ever before, they not only ceased the abuse but also demonstrated to Lily that she is worthy of protection. By dusk,
Detective Chun had gathered sufficient evidence to guarantee that Richard Cooper would never teach again. The investigation has reignited a wave of former students, each coming forward hourly to share their stories. The pattern stood out, portraying a predator who had methodically preyed upon vulnerable youth females, utilizing his influence to dismantle them incrementally. Although within that hospital, in the room observing her children's tranquil relationship,
Grace saw something different. The initiation of recovery, the gradual restoration of trust,
and the remarkable bravery of a 7-year-old kid who had declined remaining mute in the presence of misconduct. The concealed truths ultimately emerged,
accompanied by both anguish and the potential for justice, recovery, and a future where neither of her children would ever have to experience fear in their own house again.
Dr. Morris's office was painted in soft blues and greens, complemented by comfortable seats and expansive windows overlooking a modest garden. It was in this setting that Lily Baker she found herself,
for the 4th time that week, curled up in her designated chair with a weighted blanket draped across her lap. She stated, I had the dream again. Before Dr. Morris could inquire about the one in which I am attempting to scream, although no sound emerges, Dr. Morris acknowledged with a subtle notation, it is quite usual.
Lily, your mind is reflecting on the instances when you felt silenced. Would you care to discuss when those emotions originated?
In a separate room down the hall,
Ethan sat with Claire Jensen. A children's counselor constructs a tower using blocks,
each inscribed with an emotion: terrified, brave, anxious, and proud. Claire inquired,
observing Ethan, which term, angry or safe, best encapsulates your feelings today? He meticulously selected a brick, holding it up while his perplexed mother cried. Lily's behavior is distinct at Aunt Sarah's place. Despite her attempts to conceal it, she startles when doors close. It is acceptable to experience confusion regarding your family's situation, having endured a significant hardship.
You are now collectively engaged in the healing process in the Baker house, which is currently vacant. Of Grace met with Detective Chun in the kitchen to discuss Richard's items. A table, where numerous silent dinners have occurred, was reviewing new developments in the case as 2 additional students arrived. Yesterday,
Chun elucidated both narratives,
instilling confidence in the audience regarding the matter. We wish to exempt Lily from testifying, if feasible. Grace,
she gripped her coffee mug,
scarcely sleeping, and continually checked the locks on the door at Sarah's residence, which she insisted on doing. Maintaining illumination throughout the night is why these meetings with Dr. Morris are crucial.
Chan stated softly. Children exhibit notable resiliency, nonetheless.
They require time and assistance to subsequently digest her experiences in the afternoon.
Lily sat cross-legged on her bed in Aunt Sarah's guest room, endeavoring to complete her mathematics homework. A gentle knock caused her to tighten,
followed by Ethan's voice asking,
"Can I come in? I brought cookies."
Lily smiled, subtly. Ethan entered with caution.
Balancing a platter of chocolate, Sarah assisted me in preparing chocolate chip cookies and 2 glasses of milk.
Mostly contributing to the process, she created them. But I intervened. He positioned himself beside her on the bed,
observing her intently. The textbook is not as challenging as it was previously, Lily said. My head feels overwhelmed. It is now more evident that she hesitated before compelling herself to go. Given his presence, Ethan nodded solemnly while immersing a cookie in his milk. Claire remarked that it is enjoyable articulating fears,
especially the daunting ones. Diminishes their potency.
Your counselor appears astute. We engaged in activities and discussed emotions.
Today, I constructed a tower representing feelings, and he observed her assignments. Assistance required. I excel in numerical analysis. Lily experienced a genuine, yet subdued, laughter emerge. You are in 2nd grade.
Allowing me to assist you as you previously assisted me. Reminiscing about their lives prior to homework sessions.
Shared snacks and sibling banter. Unexpected tears welled in Lily's eyes, which Ethan quickly observed, his expression faltering. I apologize, I did not intend to cause this. You expressed sadness. But Lily wiped her eyes, indicating her tears were positive.
I simply missed this moment, Ethan asserted with the unwavering confidence of a 7-year-old. That you had always been his big sister. You were always my elder sister.
Even during your moments of sorrow in the kitchen below.
Sarah watched her sister Grace prepare dinner,
noting how she had reorganized the kitchen,
erasing all traces of Richard's presence. The support group assists Grace by allowing her to hear from other parents. I am not the only one who overlooks the signals,
but witnessing their healing is akin to divine intervention. Sarah observing their gradual return to self.
Sarah grasped her hand tightly. They possess one another and the luxury of time, a time to regain safety and trust once more. That evening, as the autumn light sank increasingly earlier as the makeshift family congregated around Sarah's, the discourse at the dining table was more subdued and cautious than in previous years. However, the actual Ethan recounted jokes from his lunch table at school,
as Lily suggested, considering the possibility of rejoining the soccer squad in spring.
Grace and Sarah discussed preparations for renovating the children's bedroom upon their return home,
as Dr. Morris would have suggested,
in incremental steps, foundational elements for a novel standard. After Ethan had fallen asleep while watching cartoons and Grace had left,
Lily, in need of a bath, found her Aunt Sarah in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher while humming softly. Aunt Sarah murmured to herself. Do you believe Lily hesitated then? Pressed, she inquired. Do you believe we will be all right?
All of us?
Sarah turned, gazing intently. Her niece at the shadows beneath her eyes, yet also the increasing fortitude in her posture.
The manner in which she no longer exhibited, Sarah cautiously stated that okay appears distinct for each individual but affirmed.
Yes,
dear.
You will be. Indeed. You are present and posing the inquiry. Ethan, in a state of slumber, clutched the dinosaur Rex with bravery upstairs during her bath. Grace ultimately permitted herself to weep. Not out of guilt this time, but with a sense of relief and determination. Lily Baker stood taller in the kitchen,
allowing her aunt's words to resonate.
They were all cultivating bravery in various manners. Learning to trust the silence resumed. Since it was now their decision, not confinement, but a harmony they were collaboratively constructing. Day by day Detective Chun sat at her desk,
examining the most recent victim impact statement provided by Emma Walsh's testimony initiated a deluge of reports, as 23 girls have come forward in the preceding 2 weeks, each with their narrative of Richard Cooper's use of authority and trust. Detective Officer Mike Roberts approached at her doorway,
stating that there was someone present with whom she needed to converse. A former administrator, Margaret Winters, the retiring vice principal of Lakewood Middle School,
epitomized her status with gray hair and sensible shoes with eyes laden with remorse.
She set a substantial folder on Chen's desk. She softly stated that it was against policy, however. I sensed that something was off. He consistently directed his attention towards certain girls,
particularly those who were weak single parents experiencing recent divorces or struggling with their academics. As Chun opens the folder locating comprehensive notes, dates, and observations across a 3-year period. Why was this not accomplished? You reported this earlier, I attempted to convey Winter's voice,
which faltered. Yet he was exceedingly cautious. He consistently left no evidence and provided plausible explanations.
Earning the trust of his parents, he would provide additional assistance in mentoring once I accumulated sufficient evidence to construct a case. He intended to relocate and begin anew elsewhere. She gazed with intense eyes, however. I remained steadfast. Monitoring him encompasses all complaints and every dubious encounter.
Recognizing that eventually someone would require this, Grace sat in the conference across town in her lawyer's office. She reviewed the divorce papers,
the words irreconcilable blurring before her eyes. Distinctions between exclusive custody and restraining order as desired by the school district. The lawyer informed her that they are confronting significant culpability for not investigating the prior instances. She can utilize that to guarantee the children's future security. Considering the therapy expenses and Lily's impending operation for her damaged wrist and the lost income from taking leave to care for her children,
I do not seek financial compensation. Instead, I want them to reassess their approach to handling abuse complaints and implement appropriate protocols. This occurrence is unprecedented for any other youngster. We can assert this,
as her counsel has guaranteed mandatory reporting training and compensation policy changes for your family's distress at Riverside Middle. Principal Martinez convened with the school board to report the findings of during their internal probe.
The mood was tense, with grim expressions as they examined the systematic failures that occurred. Richard Cooper was permitted to transfer between schools,
revealing a pattern of disregarded complaints submitted by Martinez not only here,
but also throughout districts. Educators have observed troubling behavior. Formal reporting of transfer requests was discouraged,
and they were processed without documentation. A proper inquiry revealed that the system protected him,
not the pupil. In Dr. Morris's office,
Lily was experiencing a breakthrough session at which she discussed the initial episodes for the first time. The insidious methods by which Richard had commenced eroding her confidence occurred well in advance of the onset of physical abuse. It felt as though he were erasing me,
she said,
clutching a tissue in her hands. My voice,
my friends, and soccer, everything that constituted my identity, which I relinquished to him. Dr. Morris softly suggested. Now you see that you did not merit any of it.
Yes. Lily's Ethan recognized my true self. Even while I was unable to perceive it, I no longer recognize myself. In Ethan's primary school class,
an art project was underway while other children illustrated Superman and Wonder Woman.
Ethan meticulously depicted 2 figures, one tall and one smaller, holding hands.
His teacher inquired about their identities, and I responded that they are he and Lily. He colored the tiny figures blue, which is his sister's favorite color. Occasionally, heroes do not don capes, rather, they simply convey the truth.
Detective Chun remarked on Margaret Winter. The materials in the expanding case file underscored the deliberate nature of Richard's abuse and how he targeted his victims. The victims were isolated and made to feel useless while he maintained an impeccable reputation among his peers. However,
the truth was ultimately surfacing, not in whispers this time,
but with conviction. Emma Walsh's voice was steady as she spoke the demeaning remarks that had compelled her to attempt suicide. Margaret Winter's voice laden with the weight of years amid exasperated efforts to safeguard her students.
Grace's voice was resolute as she called for institutional reform,
particularly emphasizing the perspectives of Lily and Ethan. Baker, a sister and brother whose bond had demonstrated resilience under the silence imposed by their abuser. The narrative was emerging as a driver for transformation, compelling educational institutions to address their shortcomings and establish new safeguards. The truth previously obscured by layers of institutional ineptitude and deliberate
manipulation was illuminated,
allowing the Baker family and others to heal. The courthouse towered above, protecting all the youngsters whose bravery had ignited these changes, its brick facade illuminated by the early morning light.
Lily stood at the base of the steps,
her hand securely grasped in her mother's,
while Ethan maintained a strong hold on the other hand. They constituted a minor coalition of strength as District Attorney Sarah Martinez approached you.
Prepared inquired softly about her briefcase,
which included months of accumulated photographic evidence, medical reports, testimony transcripts,
and Margaret Winter's thorough record-keeping necessitate my examination of him. Lily's voice was soft yet unwavering. No, sweetheart.
You must simply look at me or your
mother.
Recall that Ethan's testimony yesterday was remarkably compelling,
suggesting that we may. Detective Chan sat in the courtroom with a row of former students, including Emma Walsh,
Sophie Carter,
Katie Rodriguez,
and others.
Each girl represented a distinct chapter in Richard Cooper's history of abuse,
prompting them all to support Lily in testifying to the reality they had previously ignored.
Apprehensive to articulate prior to Grace grasping Lily's hand as Richard was escorted in, donning an orange jumpsuit rather than his customary pressed clothes, he appeared diminished and less formidable. Officer Mike Roberts intentionally positioned himself to obstruct his view of the teacher's authority. The prosecutor's opening statement highlighted the years of systematic abuse perpetrated by Richard Cooper. Role as an educator defined, isolate,
and exploit vulnerable young females. He transitioned from school to school, leaving behind a legacy of fractured confidence and muted voices. Yet now Margaret Winters was the first to testify.
Her silver hair glinting, the fluorescent lights illuminated her as she recounted her years of exasperated efforts to reveal Richard's behavior. Reading from her notes from his tenure at Lakewood Middle School at the age of 12, weeping in the restroom following a meeting with Mr. Cooper, who labeled me as worthless. Emma Walsh recounted the foolish shame inflicted on her family by Richard. Emotional abuse had pushed her to the verge of suicide. He would retain me beyond class,
labeling me as pathetic and asserting that no one cared. I began to believe him. But then Ethan's testimony from the previous day was presented. Upon resuming the film, the courtroom fell hushed as they observed the 7-year-old articulate his explanation.
Remarkable clarity in recognizing the indicators of abuse. Lily ceased to be. Lily's recorded voice stated plainly that she became silent and frightened,
while Richard behaved kindly when mother was around.
She was unkind, yet,
in her absence,
Miss Collins instructed us on how to phone 911 in case of danger. Upon hearing Lily's cries and witnessing Richard inflicting harm upon her,
I called Lily during a break, seated in a private room with Dr. Morris,
performing breathing techniques.
She muttered, "Everyone is so courageous.
Emma,
Miss Winters,
Ethan,
and others are voicing their concerns. You have empowered them."
Dr. Morris responded that your narrative demonstrated to them that they alone were alleviated and that their voices warranted acknowledgement. The prosecution introduced the photographs of Lily's injuries and medical reports to provide physical evidence.
Detective Chan discovered hidden journals in Lily's room,
documenting months of assault and highlighting the recurring pattern. Numerous institutions provided evidence of Richard's use of his transfers to avoid accountability. Richard's defense sought to portray him as a stringent yet compassionate educator endeavoring to assist underperforming children, but confronted with the preponderance of evidence and witness rendered their arguments ineffective and systematic. The nature of his maltreatment was documented across several years and across multiple institutions. The verdict was unambiguous. He was guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence demonstrated the gravity of his offenses and the violation of trust. 15 years without the chance of release,
and he would be permanently prohibited from re-entry. To engage with children once more,
and his teaching license was irrevocably annulled as Richard was escorted away. He ultimately confronted his victims,
but instead of the terrified girls he had persecuted, he observed a line of young ladies standing resolutely, supporting one another. At the end of the line stood Lily Baker, no longer present, hunching to reduce her stature.
She held her brother's small hand firmly as they stood outside the courthouse, Surrounded by reporters assembled to listen to Grace Baker's declaration regarding the institutional modifications being enacted in the educational system despite the implementation of compulsory reporting training,
enhanced background checks, and new methods for evaluating complaints.
the fundamental issue still persists. The narrative unfolded on the courthouse steps,
where a collective of survivors gathered in the autumn sunlight with the silence finally disrupted. Ethan pulled at Lily's sleeve and inquired,
"Can we procure ice cream?"
The question, so banal after such an incredible day, elicited a laugh from Lily. "Yes. Ice cream sounds perfect,"
she replied. They descended the courthouse steps together, mother, daughter, and son, toward a future they had diligently endeavored to regain. Emma Walsh smiled through tears, while Margaret Winters maintained a more upright posture. Detective Chun concluded her file on the case that revealed years of concealed abuse. The truth had surfaced, justice was achieved,
and a family demonstrated resilience,
illustrating that the most profound acts of bravery, the smallest sounds willing to articulate, emerge from the trees lining Cedar Street,
which have shed their leaves,
forming a carpet dazzling gold and crimson crunched under Grace Baker's boots as she returned home from the mandated reporting. 3 months had elapsed after Richard's punishment during the training session at Riverside Middle School and the subsequent modifications.
They had battled for them and were finally being implemented. Principal Martinez hastened to establish the new protocols last week.
Grace reported a discrepancy between 2 teachers regarding behavior. Cases may have eluded us prior to Good Grace's clear assertion, so we exert ourselves. No further transfers will be permitted without investigation,
and student dismissals will cease. Lily sat at her desk, composing an essay for her English class amidst domestic concerns. The subject was courage. And for once,
the words flowed effortlessly. Courage is not usually. At times it manifests as a loud outcry,
other times as a hushed plea for assistance,
or as a phone call in the darkness. My 7-year-old brother imparted the lesson that courage manifests in several forms and that voicing one's thoughts can transform more than a single life. However,
her phone vibrated with a message from Emma Walsh regarding the support group meeting. Tomorrow. The new girl requires your narrative.
Lily grinned while crafting a response. The support group had become an essential component of her rehabilitation journey. Individuals who had endured analogous abuse discovered empowerment in recounting their experiences.
Realizing they were not isolated, they referred to this as the truth tellers, a designation that originated as a jest but persisted, becoming a sign of their collective recovery.
Ethan sprawled on the living room floor. His homework was on the floor of the room. He had been promoted to an advanced math class now that the pall over their residence has dissipated. Confidence is growing. A certificate from the police department adorned the wall. The wall above him commemorates his exceptional bravery and service to others. Although Ethan maintained that he had merely acted as anyone would, Grace lingered in the doorway, observing her son as he worked. The therapists had cautioned her about potential trauma responses were delayed reactions to the stress he had experienced. However,
Ethan had demonstrated draw Morris, exhibiting remarkable resilience. Attributed his success to taking action rather than succumbing to helplessness. He discovered a method to safeguard his sister, and that sense of agency facilitated his processing of the incident. Then, the doorbell rang. Detective Chun entered from the cold. She had become a frequent visitor for inspections. She informed the family about the repercussions of their case today. While carrying a substantial manila package, the school board ratified all the newly announced policies,
disseminating the paperwork on the kitchen table as necessary, training on reporting for all staff,
an anonymous tip system for pupils, and comprehensive background checks,
including cross-referencing transfer records, in addition to completing the support program proposed by Lily,
which includes peer counseling. Grace gently introduced it as the Baker Initiative for Abuse Survivors. Lily, still ashamed by that moniker, touched the documents,
acknowledging that her family's situation had altered everything. Richard Cooper's conviction has prompted 3 additional districts to reach out regarding the use of similar measures. Upstairs, Lily concluded her essay by reiterating the same phrases she had used during Richard's sentence. Justice extends beyond punishment, it involves transformation.
Striving to prevent others from repeating my experience. Transforming anguish into purpose, quiet into resilience,
and fear into optimism. Occasionally,
justice commences with a solitary voice.
Even if that voice originates from a second grader who possesses an innate understanding, my brother rescued not only me that night but also any student who could have encountered maltreatment. His silence demonstrated that the truth,
once articulated, can never be concealed once more. That is what justice signifies to me now, not a conclusion, but an inception. We can't change the past, but we can protect the future, which is worth fighting for and discussing. She reclined in support of causes deserving of advocacy, regardless of one's perceived insignificance. As she read her lines,
she observed via her window the location where police vehicles had stationed themselves that night. Illuminations casting red and blue hues upon the street now revealed a contrasting scene of children playing, unencumbered parents conversing on porches in a community that had become more vigilant and responsive. Justice had arrived at Cedar Street not alone through a courtroom ruling but in the daily transformations that would safeguard the future. Generations embody the fortitude of people who discovered their voices through the resilience of a family that will not yield. The darkness prevails,
and in the uncomplicated insight of a 7-year-old, it is understood that occasionally,
the most courageous act is to confront one's fears. The truth is that spring has blossomed on Cedar Street,
bringing the fragrance of fresh grass and new possibilities.
The Baker house has been revitalized with newly painted walls and replaced furniture. The windows stayed open to welcome the refreshing breeze.
Yet all traces of Richard Cooper had vanished, replaced by signs. Lily stood before her mirror, adjusting her soccer attire for the first time in almost a year.
She donned a jersey featuring the number 14 emblazoned across her back,
with Baker inscribed prominently above it. Sophie, her old teammate and best friend, had taken on the role of team captain, and her first action was to rescue Lily.
Ethan's voice resonated up the stairs.
Lily, we are going to be late. He designated himself her unofficial timekeeper for practices, assuming his supporting brother role with utmost seriousness. Grace was in the kitchen,
preparing orange slices for the team and keeping a close watch on her children through the window. Ethan was also present, exhibiting his soccer maneuvers in the backyard.
He elicited laughter from Lily as he theatrically collapsed after each kick. Their laughter, previously infrequent, now regularly fills the house.
No.
Have you? Lily called down near the door, indicating that my cleats were precisely where I had left them the previous 6 months. Have introduced improvements extending beyond their family.
As the Baker program has been applied in schools across 3 locations, states are increasingly joining each month, with images of Ethan earning his Gallantry Award displayed at the elementary school lobby adjacent to new posters emphasizing assertiveness and reliance on intuition.
Detective Chun was promoted to head a new Special Victims Response Unit,
utilizing insights gained from the Cooper case enhance the management of abuse complaints. Emma Walsh is currently employed part-time at a crisis hotline.
Maintaining a low profile, Grace inquired as Lily energetically descended.
Are you prepared to assist others in discovering their voice?
The stares appeared more reminiscent of her former self than she had in months. She grinned, then hesitated. Do you believe I will recall how to play?
Ethan,
with the assurance characteristic of his 7 years,
assured her while riding a bike. Additionally,
my practice with you rendered the journey to the soccer field distinct from the stressful automobile rides of the past. Previously, Lily occupied the front seat with the window lowered.
Vocalizing to the radio, Ethan contributed fervent backup vocals from the rear, improvising lyrics when he was unfamiliar with the actual phrases. The soccer field was bustling with bustle as parents arranged chairs,
children engaged in warm-up exercises,
and coaches coordinated drills as Sophie sprinted as soon as they arrived.
You were just in time for shooting practice. Lily promptly retrieved her luggage. Ethan grinned and expressed gratitude, saying,
"Thank you for being my cheerleader."
As Lily jogged onto the field, Grace and Ethan prepared their equipment.
Parents on the sidelines waved and exchanged greetings. Inside, the neighborhood parents had united in support,
demonstrating that mending is most effective when individuals collaborate.
Ethan,
chewing on an orange slice, inquired, "Are we in a satisfactory state now?" Grace gazed at her kid, her courageous and insightful demeanor evident, a kind little boy who transformed numerous lives with a single phone call. Then she observed Lily giggling with her teammates' practice passing, her movements becoming increasingly assured with each kick.
"Yeah,
sweetie," she murmured quietly, "we are acceptable." Perhaps distinct, but acceptable. Distinctiveness is advantageous.
As Ethan concluded, Lily has transformed, she is now more resilient.
As are we all. The coach's whistle sounded. And as the game commenced, Lily assumed her position on the field, no longer stooping to diminish her stature. She,
formerly smaller and no longer fearful of occupying space,
celebrated her first goal. The celebration was sheer elation. Arms elevated towards the heavens. Face radiant with triumph, Ethan said, bouncing up and down. That's my sister. That's my older sister. That evening, the three bakers sat on their front porch,
savoring ice cream cones while observing the sunset over the street. Was tranquil, characterized by the typical sounds of a neighborhood at twilight, children cycling,
dogs barking,
and screen doors creaking. Grace stated that the governor's office contacted her. They request our participation as speakers at the event. There will be a signing ceremony for the new protection legislation next month.
Contingent upon your comfort. Lily and Ethan exchanged a glance, a form of silent communication that had intensified through their shared experiences. Lily stated that individuals must understand that requesting assistance is acceptable. Ethan mentioned that Miss Collins asserts our narrative empowers other children to exhibit courage. Grace embraced each of her children, admiring their resilience, compassion, and steadfastness. Through mutual support, they rose from darkness, not merely surviving but thriving,
transformed by truth, empowered by love, prepared to assist others in discovering their path to enlightenment. On Cedar Street during the spring evenings as twilight descended, the houses around the block began to illuminate with glowing lights. Each window symbolizes a family,
a narrative, and a capacity for both damage and healing occurred. Although in the baker's residence, the lights shone particularly brightly,
illuminating three individuals who had acquired the most significant insight that occasionally the conclusion of one narrative marks the inception of a superior one.
In the beginning, there existed hope, strength, and love. Final tranquility.